Namaste and welcome to Atharva Forum. Today we are going to talk about communism, not as an ideology or a system of governance, but the destructive and detrimental impact of communism in India over the years. Usually, in such conversations, we start with history, but in the case of communism, I would not do so because there is already a lot that has been written and talked about. In a nutshell, however, the history of communism in India started as an impact of October Revolution and after that trade unions started forming and communist parties rose to steady prominence. For decades there was influence from Russia and then China, and while today communist parties are politically irrelevant, we cannot deny that they still wield a considerable social influence. We are very honored to have our guest for today, J Nandakumar ji, who has worked relentlessly in revealing the brutal impact of communism. Nandakumar ji is the national convener for Prajna Pravaha, an author, a poet, and a powerful orator, and he is no stranger to understanding and taking on the violent communist ideology. Namaskar, Nandakumar ji.
Namaskar. Namaskar, Bhavesh ji. Namaskar.
Um, so, Nandakumar ji, to start with, communism in India has existed for about 100 years now. And while there is always an underlying revolutionary zeal uh, of pursuing a classless society by communist parties, violence has always been an inherent part of their ideology. Our nation has bore the brunt of gruesome communist violence over the years, and what is worse is even history books are stubbornly silent about this. And even in an age of social media, recent events of communist violence get completely ignored. So let me start with a very simple question. What makes the communist ideology such a violent ideology?
Namaskar, Bhavesh ji. Namaskar to all Atharva viewers, and I am highly privileged to be invited to discuss a matter which I like. How far it is relevant, that's a very big question. Communism is a dead ideology. It's dead, actually. Touching a dead body itself, हमारे विचारधारा के आधार पर it's somewhat okay, taboo. Anyway, we are discussing it about. See, communism, as per my definition or observation, it is destructive in practice and defective in theory. In a sentence, it can be defined in that way. See, their the so-called ideology, which was a failed god, anyway, it always talk about class struggle. See, the scientific interpretation of the history, dialectical materialism, and this materialistic progress is all on the basis of class struggle, class war in between haves and have-nots. This ideology is their basic thing. So they divide the society into two major social classes, the proletariat and the bourgeois. The bourgeois has private ownership of the means of production, and the proletariat has no ownership of the means of production. These classes are directly antagonistic, and the conflict between these two classes is the root of all problems in the society as per their definition. According to Marx, to abolish capitalism and liberate the proletariat, there is only one solution, that is the abolition of private property through revolution, through annihilation of bourgeois, annihilation of the class enemies. Thus, the proletariat will capture political power, abolish bourgeois property through the common ownership of the means of production, therefore abolishing the bourgeoisie and ultimately abolishing the proletariat itself and ushering the world into a new mode of production, communism. In between capitalism and communism, there is the dictatorship of the proletariat that is inherently undemocratic and fascist in concept. So in the very ideology, this undemocratic nature is there, fascism is there, violent methods to annihilate the so-called class enemies. So violence is their very methodology. Everywhere, wherever the communism came into existence, I'm not saying that communism in its ultimate definition has come into existence, but this political philosophy came into existence. They ruled the masses through these violent methods only. So it is inherent in their ideology. It is a failed ideology that I have already said. Already Bhavesh ji has said that we are not going to analyze it ideologically,
Yes.
but I would
Yes.
like to add 2 3 words if you permit. Okay,
Sure.
I would like to quote, say, Keynes, uh, about Das Capital. I would quote an obsolete textbook which I know to be not only scientifically erroneous but without interest or application for the modern world. Another important definition which has been done by the most famous philosopher of science, Karl Popper, in his book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, characterized scientific socialism as a pseudoscience. He argues that its method is what he calls historicism. Historicism, the method of analyzing historical trends and deriving universal laws from them. He criticizes this approach as unscientific, as its claims cannot be tested and, in particular, are not subject to being disproven. And also, as far as Asiatic society or Bharatiya society are concerned, Marx himself admitted that his theory could not explain the internal development of the Asiatic social system, where much of the world's population lived for thousands of years. So, almost all great philosophers of our times, the modern times, Karl Popper, David Prichko, Francis Fukuyama, Dinadayal Upadhyaya, Guruji Golwalkar, Datovan Dhengadi, all of them have said that it is an erroneous ideology and a destructive, dangerous methodology. So it is inherent in their ideology. It is a violent nature that I have already said. It is undemocratic and fascist in nature. So they adopt violent methods for their furtherance. That's it.
Very, very well said, Nandakumarji. And I really liked when you said about the destructive and the defective part. And to move forward, one of the things that has not really been much talked about is that communism in itself is a foreign influence. Because I wanted to come to the part of the kind of foreign influence that happens within our country. And right from the start, the foreign influence has been very apparent, from the early days of Communist International to the, I would say, the later influence of Russia, China, and we have seen this pernicious impact on national narratives through education, entertainment, news, media, art and culture, and all aspects of life, right? And just to give at a top level, we are talking about history books that whitewash entire centuries of persecution and bloodbath, and we have movies that drive wedges in the social fabric. We have authors who support violent insurgents by calling them Gandhians with guns. We have newspapers who could hardly hide the communist influence or interference in their articles. And they have played a huge role in embedding communism in the minds of the younger generation. Generation that is also, I would say, rendered ruthless by the communist influence through constant criticism and ridicule of our own civilizational values and identity. So uh, now we are in a connected world, and where the network is still global, and in a way this cuts both ways, because it also reveals the sinister side of communism. Uh, and as you rightly said, if it is an inherently violent ideology, then there is more to communism than meets the eye, such as funding routes, smuggling of drugs and weapons, ideological brainwashing, institutional hijacking, and not to mention, there is always an intellectual layer of apologists who whitewash communist violence. And we have seen that with the other global ideology that is currently far more pervasive, which is Islamism. And we'll come to the links between the two shortly. But right now, Nandakumarji, what, in your opinion, has been the role of foreign influence in terms of propagating the communist ideology within our country?
That's an awesome, fantastic question, and it has been well explained by you yourself. What all havoc has been created, generated by this communist foreign ideology. See, at the start, in the beginning itself, you have to understand that this very ideology hasn't got anything to do with the nation, our nations, our Rashtra. It's an alien ideology, it's a foreign ideology, in that which hasn't got anything to do with the national ethos, our customary practices, traditional belief system, historical values, philosophical, our thinking pattern, everything is foreign in its nature. See the name itself. It is Communist Party of India. What does it mean? Can you identify any other political party? We have got Indian National Congress. We have got Bharatiya Janata Party. All these parties are Bharatiya, whatever it may be. But what about Communist Party of India? What does it mean? The party is working elsewhere, or the center is somewhere else, being controlled from outside. It is a mere branch of that Communist Party. It's a mere branch or a franchisee which is being controlled from Russia or China or somewhere else. See, and again, third point, you are all well aware about the fact that the Communist Party of India was founded by Manavendranath Roy, and the first cell was formed in Tashkent. It was a Russian, area. Right from the beginning, Manavendranath Roy, who passing through Germany en route to Moscow in 1919, he was influenced by this communist philosophy, and Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky, the trio of Russian Communist Party or Communist International, have asked him to start a unit of International Communist Party for India somewhere in the communist influenced area of Tashkent, and Manavendranath Roy started this sort of work there. At that time, what was the background of these founders, the so-called founders of the Indian branch of Communist Party? They were all working along with Germany and in liaison. You have already said that Islamo-leftist connection and links will be discussed later, so I am not going much into detail. Just I am saying, at that time, German and this so-called Indian communists were all working together in training the Islamic fundamentalists or fanatics who have started the Caliphate movement. So these connections were also there at that time. Dr. Gary K. Bush of the University of Hawaii and an authority on international trade union puts the deal crisply. What was the deal in between Britain and the so-called Communist Party of India, so-called Indian branch of Communist Party? I would like to say, British Communist Party has been given the responsibility to look after or supervise or direct the Indian branch of Communist Party. British Communist. And Rajani Pamedat was a half Indian communist leader, half Indian and half Englishman, has been given this specific responsibility. That connection was there. So Gary K. Bush of the expert in international trade union puts this deal in between Britain and India, Britain and Communist Party, very crisply. I'm quoting. The British government in India made a pact with the CPI and released the communists from detention. It made the Communist Party legal and encouraged the communists to take control of the trade unions from the militant Congress unionists. It was intact at that time, and it has been taken over by the communist people with the, orders given from Britain. Again, he is repeating. Yeah. The British made money and supplies available to the CPI to start papers and journals in India. The largest was the English language periodical of theirs named People's War. People's War was started, money which has been pumped by British Communist Party or British government. That was the history. So that connection. The second was Britain and the Communist Party of. So in the beginning, it was in a sense Indian branch of English Communist Party. Let me put it correctly again. It was Indian branch of British Communist Party. Again, there will be a doubt come into our mind. What Marxists do to reciprocate the British generosity? Again, Bush, after his thorough research, he was saying, P.C. Joshi was the secretary of the undivided Communist Party of that period. Comrade P.C. Joshi and Sir Reginald Maxwell, then British Home Secretary in Government of India, formed an alliance. The British Army Intelligence Department had a wing to liaise with the Indian communists and to spy on nationalists and their planned strikes on the British. The communists also provided the British blacklists of nationalist agitators. Blacklist of nationalist agitators were being supplied by British Indian Communist Party leaders. The communists even offered to provide troops to entertain conscripted soldiers fighting in Burma. So, and again, how they are then by 1950 onwards, the Chinese Communist Revolution, 40s onwards, the after 1900 Boxer War, the unrestness began in China. Mao Zedong took all the atmosphere in favor of him, and Chinese Revolution took place. And at that time, the Indian Communist Party sided with China during Indo-China War. A fraction of CPI sided with China during the Indo-China War and later broke away from the main party and formed the CPIM. See, the division, the major division of Communist Party is not at all anything related to ideology. You take it from me, nothing. They are saying something to cover it up, but actually, whom to support, Russia or China? That's the only thing. That's why. So, foreign influencer was always there with them. And another thing, this betrayal of Indian independence struggle, I already said, under the behest of Russian Communist Party, they have supported Britain because Britain and England became the allied partners of the World War. And also during emergency also, Communist Party took side with the so-called dictator Indira Gandhi to rule Bharat in a fascist way. Communist Party, who claim that always stands for freedom of expression and all sort of, you have already said that those people who, those Gandhians raising guns, that type of people, actually, they were against democracy, they were against freedom of expression, all because Russian Communist Party have directed them to support Indira Gandhi. That was the thing. You know, Russian Communist Party was pumping money like anything into the Congress system also. So this mutual business, supporting business was there. And also because of this Communist Party influence, this alien influence, they worked against anything Indian, anything Bharatiya. So they worked through, as you said correctly, through cinema, art form. Everywhere they are creating binary. Everywhere they are creating an atmosphere against Bharatiya ethos, Bharatiya culture, and everything. And n number of examples we can give. They were supporting those who are, drawing Bharat Mata as a naked woman. Those who are against the temple worship. Those who are against Ramayana, Mahabharata, they are in support of them. It's all because of their foreign influence, and because I have already said that nothing they have to do, nothing in relation with Bharatita, Bharatiyatva.
Absolutely. And the part that you talked about, Nandakumarji, which is their their treacherous role for during the Indian independence is something right now, which is unpardonable. But this is something that we have not even been able to talk about a lot. It's slowly, I think, it's coming up, and I would really like to discuss that in the context of the RSS, and I will come to that in a short while. What I would like to do right now is also come to an important part of our discussion, which is the nexus between communism and Islam. And you had, talked about the Caliphate, the Khilafat movement, and I would also like to start from there, because apparently the Khilafat movement was also a key event in the rise of communism in India, as you talked about M.N. Roy and the Germany angle there. And apparently there were many Muslims who participated in the Khilafat movement, and on their way back through the Soviet Union, they had adopted communism. And we know, the Khilafat movement eventually led to the rise of the Muslim League and the subsequent partition of India as well. Uh, and as you have very succinctly mentioned, I think, and you've emphasized this a lot, that the left has always had a problem with the idea of a united and strong Bharat, and this is something that you have written as well. And this also explains why they had supported the Muslim League as well as the Razakars earlier. And in recent times too, the rise of Islamism is a concern, and it finds support from the leftists of all hues of red. We have seen that in JNU, we have seen that in Shaheen Bagh, and this whole mutual back scratching to destroy the fabric of the nation. So, if we really look at it, both are global ideas that are driven by a very well-oiled network. The network attracts, converts, and recruits people from across the societal spectrum. And we could always argue that they are different in a religious sense, and yet there has been a very cozy alliance between them since a long time. And this is no more apparent than in Kerala today. And the PFI rally in Kerala that was reported earlier this year paraded chain people dressed in the RSS uniforms, and the rally depicted the Mopla massacre of the Hindus. And on the other side, there is a communist government, which is recognizing the Mopla fanatics as freedom fighters and martyrs. So, Nandakumarji, we would like to hear from you about this nexus that exists between communism and Islamism.
Yes, you have correctly said there is an unholy nexus between uh, the so-called, atheist philosophy of communism and the religious philosophy or religious ideology of Islamic movements. Islamo-leftism, actually that word is a new word, is a neologism applied to political alliance between political left and political Islam. French philosopher Pascal Bruckner defined the term Islamo-leftism as the fusion between the atheist far left and religious radicalism. In 2016, there was a huge discussion, and Paul Berman wrote a wonderful article about this, and he draws parallel between extreme communist ideologies and Islamism. Actually, both share the same history as far as their standard operating procedures are concerned. Standard operating procedures means main thing is annihilating all others. One is saying that they are class enemies, another is saying that they are kafirs. Both of them are trying to annihilate the enemies, the so-called enemies, whoever it may, fascist, kafirs, or class enemies. So these standard operating procedures are there in both of them. That is their connecting link, I would like to say. And utmost hatred towards the unbelievers, non-believers, or those who are not believing in their ideology. So they are the connecting links. When the Communist Party, historically when we are analyzing, Communist Party has got the link in a manner. There is an एक प्रकार से delivery के time है ये संबंध, umbilical cord का जो संबंध है, it is there. When the Communist Party of India was formed in 1920 at Tashkent, there is a huge controversy going on in between the CPM and CPI. That CPI is saying that it has started in 1925 in Kanpur. But CPM is saying that it has already been started on December 15th of 1920 in Tashkent. Recently, one of the topmost ideologues, they were giving direction to the right-wing Communist Party, that is CPI, that if you are always insisting that the party was started in 1925, we will not get the credit of so many of the revolutions took place prior to 1925. Right. So be careful. That is the direction given by the big brother to the small brother. Let it be there. So M.N. Roy, as the principal organizer of the party, was keen on and successfully recruited young ex-Mujahid students from India. Manavendranath Roy and his wife Evelyn Roy Trent played a key role in bringing Muhammad Shafiq, Muhammad Ali, Maulana Mohani, and other ex-Mujahids into the fold of the nascent Communist Party. You know, during the Caliphate, it has already been mentioned, during the Caliphate, many of the Islamic fundamentalist fanatics left India and did Hijra, because it is an Islamic duty as per their holy book that no believers shall live in a Darul Harab, If it is a Darul Harb, two duties are there. If you are able to convert the Darul Harb to Darul Islam, then well and good, you can live there. Try it. If you are failing, then the second duty is to do the Hijrat towards next Darul Islam from Darul Harb. As per Caliphate leaders, India is a Darul Harb. So they have to try to make it into a Darul Islam, but they failed miserably. So to attack afterwards, they have to retreat towards the Darul Islam. They did it. But Afghanistan soldiers, though they are Islamists or Muslim, they were not ready to accept them. They shot them like anything. Some of them ran away and seek asylum there in Tashkent, Russian property. At that point, Manivendranath Roy also entered into there, in that place, with the directions given by the communist trio, Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky, and he came to there. And they bring in the major leaders, like I have already said, that Muhammad Ali, Muhammad Shafiq type personalities were brought in. The Mujahids enthusiastically joined the early CPI as its founders and earliest members. They had started their journey from India as Mujahids and joined the process of Hijra, or religious exodus, that I have already said, from the land ruled by the infidels. The Communist Party of India was formed at Tashkent. 7 members were, first 7 members I would like to quote, I am taking it from the Communist Party's website. Manavendra Dharai, Evelyn Roy Trent, that is his wife, Abani Mukherjee, Rosa Fittingov, Muhammad Ali, Muhammad Shafiq. And Shafiq was elected as a secretary of party. Roy as secretary of party's Politburo, based in socialist Turkestan, and Acharya as the chairman who signs the minutes. So the first secretary of the party and the major member Muhammad Ali were all ex-Mujahids. So the connection was right from the period of birth ka jo samay se hi, this connection was there. From the I'm coming to my Kerala. So I could quote, and I can give n number of names. The former Communist Party workers who are working as fundamentalist Islamic workers and fundamentalist Islamic fanatic leaders who are working as Communist Party. See, from the political history of Kerala, it is quite evident that Islamists have always grown under the safe cover. Cover fire has been given by the Communist Party. Communist Party. If you profile some of the top leaders of the terrorist outfits like SDPI and PFI, most of them will have a communist background. And again, take some Muslim names in CPM, for example. I have already said. The first example I would like to say that the Minister KT Jalil, he was an LDF minister, very much controversial in the recent gold smuggling case also. And this comrade Jalil was a former SIMI activist. When he was the state leader of the SIMI, Students Islamic Movement of India, who, coined the slogan, India's Mukti is through Islam. That was their main slogan, which has been coined during this KT Jalil's time, and this KT Jalil, now he is a CPM member. Another example, CH Nasser, now an SDPI leader, he was a former Marxist Naxalite and state leader of CPI ML. Again, I would like to give you examples. This Nexus, it is not just a namesake allegation. It is a true fact. It is a truth. C.K. Abdul Aziz, he was an Excel leader or a Maoist or a CPI ML leader, later joined Madani's PDP. Madani may be knowing, Madani was the main leader or the master strategist behind the Coimbatore bomb blast case, in which Lal Krishna Advani, then Deputy Prime Minister, was targeted. That Madani's PDP is now led by one C.K. Abdul Aziz, who was former CPI ML leader. So there are so many examples which I could give. And again, this Madani has been given a title by none other than late EMS Namboodiripad, that he is same as or as good or as respected as Mahatma Gandhi. So gave a title Mahatma Madani. Mahatma Madani, in which EMS Namboodiripad was saying, explaining that Gandhi used the Hindu religion as a political weapon, and Madani is using Islamic religion. What is the difference in between? So Mahatma Gandhi and Mahatma Madani are same. That's the way in which they are doing. Now, another point I would like to say, it is not a part of your question, but still I would like to say, is it just an Indian phenomenon? No, it is a global history too. The tactical alliance between leftists and Islamists happen whenever or wherever they have a common enemy. Most of the time, nationalists, be it American nationalism or European right wing. The history of the West suggests that they are reactionary to the nationalism and anti-Semitic in character. In Bharat, obviously, the Hindutva ideology and the cultural Hindus, the torchbearers of nationalism, are their common enemy. Apart from their Western adversaries like Jewish Christian nationalism, Hindutva is not a religious entity but a cultural entity. So, they have redefined their strategy in India, targeting both the religious symbols of the majority and the cultural and civilizational ethos of Bharat simultaneously. That is the two-pronged strategy of Islamo-leftist group here. They are targeting the religious symbols of majority and cultural and civilizational ethos of Bharat simultaneously. So this is their way. This connection is very much there. It is too strange to understand. But when we are going deep into their standard operational method, there are similarities. So they are linked each other. And this unholy nexus is the danger which we all are facing nowadays. Political Islam plus political left.
Absolutely, and on the topic of Hindutva that you had mentioned, I would like to now come to the core part of our discussion. Which is communists and their hatred for the Sangh, and the constant targeting of the RSS. And while the role of the RSS during the freedom struggle has always come under question by these leftists, there was always a convenient silence, I would say, over the treachery of the communists, which you very well brought out. And the whole baloney of equating the Hindu Rashtra idea with Nazism has been, in fact, addressed by you yourself multiple times. And I have personally considered all of this as a political manifestation of what we call a psychological projection, right? Which is masking their own vileness and their own weakness by projecting it onto the enemy. And the RSS has become the target for Hindu hatred that is perpetuated not only by communists, but also by Islamists and evangelists, not to mention by political party goons in state like Bengal who have inherited violence from the erstwhile communist era. So the they have continued to dehumanize the RSS. The incessant targeting of RSS in an attempt to equate Hindu nationalism with what they coined as saffron terrorism is done so casually today that one only has to take any random snippet of speech from someone like Rahul Gandhi to observe this. If that is one part, the other part is the communist takeover of the complete academic discourse, where class has been replaced by caste, and this has developed into a full-fledged industry, I should say, to target Hindus. And RSS becomes a face of it. So my question, Nandakumarji, is, if what explains this kind of a hatred that communist parties have for the RSS?
First and foremost thing I have already said, that is a philosophical approach. There is a difference, cross difference in between the ideology or philosophy, I would like to say more precisely. As far as Sangha is concerned, its philosophy, that is very much related to, rooted in the Rashtriya Vichar, Rashtriya Darshan, that is national thought, in which we are thinking that our nation, an ancient nation, at the same time it is the most modern thing. Um, पुरातन भी है, नित्य नूतन भी है. That is one thing. And another thing, nation is one, the society is one, our culture is one. So एक राष्ट्र, एक समाज और एक संस्कृति. This is another basic philosophy which we are believing in, Sangha is believing. And another thing, any act or any occasion, as far as Rashtra is concerned, Rashtra's Itihas is concerned, we have to use it, or we all have to come together to unite and strengthen the Rashtra through that occasion. So, historically and also philosophically, Sangha is believing in one nation, one culture, one samaj, one society belief system. Specifically, apparently, communists are not believing in one nation. They are not even considering Bharat as one Rashtra. You may be knowing,
Yes.
just before Bharat's independence, they were the main advocates, protagonists of partition. Not only to Bharat, as per Communist Party's plenum's decision, they have passed a resolution in which they are saying Bharat is to be divided and divided into 16 nations. That was their first resolution. Later on, they found out, it's very strange as far as this Communist Party's finding out things are all concerned. They have said that we have found out another nation in Bharat, that is Baluchi Rashtra. So 17 or more nations are there. All of them have to be given the self-determining power to become independent nations. That was their stand. When one CMS Namboodiripad was asked, what is Rashtra is, what do you think about Bharat Rashtra? He said that it is not a Rashtra. It's a byproduct of the political or historical development of capitalism. When capitalism was developed, there is no Rashtriyata age in the communist history. There is only primitive communism, feudal system, or slave owner system, or the socialism, capitalism, communism, then socialism. This is their path towards the towards the progressive system of communism. So the EMS was interpreting it as, when capitalism was developed, there was a byproduct, that is only nationalism. So they are not considering even this nation is one. So this difference is there, this ideological difference is there. Another thing, second thing, communism by its nature is undemocratic. They are not they haven't got any belief in democracy. So my point again, when I am answering this, I would like to request our governments and all, actually in a democratic system, a party not believing democracy cannot be given permission to work. Actually, they haven't got the right to work in a democratic system. It's to be banned, this Communist Party, because as per their ideological belief system, they are believing in dictatorship. Can you just say who is the opposition leader of China? Can you just give the name of the opposition leader in Cuba? Wherever Communist Party was there, wherever, there is no opposition. There is only one party. There is the dictatorship of the Communist Party is going on. So it is undemocratic. It's haven't got any belief in democracy. Appeasement policy of Communist Party, especially towards the Islamic fanaticism and evangelizing Christian methods. They are always supporting that. So in a way, this Islamic fanaticism and evangelization process of the Christianity, Churchianity, I would like to say, not Christianity, but Churchianity, both are working against the Bharat's unity, and they are all working for the balkanization of this nation in a way or another. And the final one I would like to say, that is political reason. The political reason as far as Kerala is concerned, take Kerala as an example or a case study. In Kerala, if Communist Party wants to win, if they want to win, they have to, attract of course, the Islamic organized odds of Islamists. So organized Islamic odds agar milna hai, if they want to capture that, they want to show them that they are the enemies of their enemies. Communist Party is the enemy of the Islamist enemy. And they are creating a story, creating a scene in which they are saying RSS is against Islam. And they are propagating it that way. Many a times, when Tellicherry in Kerala, there is Tellicherry, in Kannur district, where the Communist Party of Kerala was founded there in Kannur, and they are considering it as their, fort. or their strong area, wherein which they are not allowing any other political philosophy to flourish. Especially RSS is not allowed to work in many of the villages of Communist Party, and those villages are known as party villages. So there in Tellicherry, in the beginning of 70s, there was a riot. And just after the riot, in between Hindus and Muslims, something happened there. And there was a propaganda by the Communist Party leaders that RSS did that. Actually, RSS did that, all planning and perpetrators of riot and all. But when one justice was appointed as a commission to investigate that particular riot, its reasons, its method of writing, a methodology, and everything is being investigated, and that Justice Joseph Vitayathil, from the name itself, you may be knowing he's a Christian. It is not proper to say that a justice is a Christian, but here it is necessary. Though he was a Christian, Justice Vitayathil came out with a pakka conclusion that there in which Communist Party actually involved in this riot, and they are the main reason or the inspiration or instigators of that riot. Instigators. Even Joseph Vidayathil has named none other than Comrade A.K. Gopalan, aka AKG. A.K. Gopalan has led a jeep rally during that period around Tellicherry, and the speeches made by the Communist Party leaders actually, in a way, grew fear in a way in the Islamic, so Islamic people. So Islamists, because of their some sort of security issue, or they are thinking that something is going to happen against them, they started the rioting. So the main perpetrator or instigator was Muslims. But they are creating, in a way, they are propagating that RSS is doing it all. But Joseph Vidayathil has proved categorically that Communist Party has got equal, role in that riot as Islamists have got. That was it. Actually, this Communist Party, this violent nature of Communist Party, they are working or writing or attacking rust. Samanyata kehte hain. In Kerala, it is left versus rust. All others are being attacked by the Communist Party. Lessons of history suggest that no ideology shed more blood than communism did. Owing to the staggering number of deaths it caused, communism lies a notch above all other fascist ideologies. Hence, globally, it is synonymous with violence, brutality, and totalitarianism. Unsurprisingly, Kannur model. Kannur, Communist Party's most murders took place in Kannur. Incidentally, Pinarayi Vijayan is also a product of this Kannur communism or Kannurism. Generally, the people are saying, political analyst, independent political analyst, I would like to say, they used to say that Kerala communism is not communism, it is Kannurism. So, Kannur model of CPM2, where Swayamsevaks are perpetually, Bhaveshji, you have already mentioned about the Swayamsevaks murdered there, are perpetually targeted and murdered by communists, is a natural corollary of Stalinist Russia or Maoist China, where voice of dissent and opposition be crushed with the iron fist of party and the state. The daunting situation prevailing in Kannur and other communist strongholds were CPM denies other political parties. I have already mentioned there are part villages there. They are denying the right for other political party to work, or nationalist organization like RSS, the right to work in public sphere. It is not a locally originated scenario. It is somewhat connected with your previous question, that this foreign influence, the foreign ideologies influence, or the foreign nations influence in their methodology, their methods, practice in annihilating the political enemies. Their main target became RSS because of the ideological difference. There are so many examples which I can give so many examples, including the first murder took place in Tellicherry. The first accused is the present-day Chief Minister of Kerala. Pinarayi Vijayan was at that time he was not Pinarayi Vijayan. P. Vijayan. P. Vijayan. Pinarayi is the full form of P. Okay. Pinarayi Vijayan was the first accused, and the party secretary of Kerala, at that time he was a students leader or a students Federation of India worker, Balakrishnan. He was the second or third accused. Both of them were, the court has given them, they were acquitted. Because EMS Namboodiripad was the chief minister at that time, you may be knowing, just like the judicial system and the executive system and everything is being controlled by the fascist Communist Party. EMS Namboodiripad was controlling everything, and this Communist Party young leaders and the student leaders were acquitted during that case. That first case itself has been done by the Communist Party leaders. So this is the way in which they are doing. More than 270 Swayamsevaks were murdered, killed by this Communist Party goons in Kerala. These are all because their influential areas are being, in a way, ideologically conquered or trying to conquer by RSS people. So that clash is happening, and it has got these 4 or 5 reasons also. And this Kannur method and Kannur mentality or psychology is also have played a major role in this attacks, in especially in Kerala. But it is perfectly a part or direct link is there with the communist method in Russia, communist method in Cuba, communist method in Tripura, communist method in Bengal, everywhere. You may be knowing one former communist leader of Kerala is a Muslim young leader, Abdullah Kutti. Now he is All India Vice President of BJP. Formerly he was MP of CPM. He was the national president of SFI. He was saying the method of Communist Party leaders who are trying to killing their political enemies is very gruesome. Once Pinarayi Vijayan was explaining how the adversaries are to be annihilated, even the dead bodies are to be destroyed in Bengal model. What is the Bengal model? After killing the adversary, that body is to be put in a pit, and the body is to be covered with common salt, the table salt, and cover it. Within a matter of few days, even tooth and hairs will not remain. That method is to be applied in Kerala also. That is what which Pinarayi Vijayan has given them class, and Abdullah Kutti has written it in his biography also. So this is the way in which things are going on, and they are considering the political adversaries were to be killed, and they are thinking they are fascist everywhere. If you are finding a fascist in a classroom, you can cut their neck. This is not my words. One of the foremost ideologue of CPM in Kerala, N.M. Vijayan, once said it publicly. Publicly, I'm not saying that it was a secret meeting. It was a public meeting just after when Jayakrishnan of Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha, a second-year trained Sangh Swayamsevak, was brutally murdered before his students inside the classroom when Jayakrishnan was taking class. Immediately afterwards, there was a public meeting conducted by Communist Party in which this comrade N.M. Vijayan has stated publicly, neck of the fascists can be cut, slit open, even in the classrooms. These are not secrets. This is the way. But strangely, the mainstream media of Kerala are all being controlled by the communist philosophy, ideology. They are not ready to give due publicity to this truth. That's why it hasn't become a national news also. This is the way in which things are going on.
Absolutely, the brutality that you're talking about, that it seems to have no boundaries when it comes to communist violence. When RSS is being targeted so much, there is always a general feeling that the RSS does not like to speak with the media much. Although I personally believe that speaking with the media is not necessarily the right benchmark to consider for any organization, given how the media itself works. But as you have rightly said, the attacks on RSS have been relentless, not just against the ideology of the organization, which you have covered in a lot more detail, but also in a much more human sense, against the Swayamsevaks who have dedicated themselves to the Sangh. And it almost appears that communists keep themselves relevant by continuing to perpetrate violence against the RSS and Hindus in general. So, Nandakumarji, I may be asking maybe a little too much here, but would you be able to share how the RSS itself responds to this kind of an environment that is created in states like Kerala?
Uh, See, this one-sided attacks, I have already mentioned that the first killing without Vadikal Ramakrishnan, one of our, what you say, uh, Sangha Swayamsevaks who were working to start shakhas in the communist areas, he was killed under the leadership of communist leaders like Pinarayi Vijayan and all. So it was a one-sided attacks. It is happening in Kerala because Communist Party has got strength in some areas. As far as Sangha is concerned, which is believing in the democratic values of this great nation, we have reacted to it in the most cultured, civilized, democratic way. We have conducted public protests. Even you have already said that it is not at all the only method to react, that is approaching media. We have approached media also. Even to the extent, you may be knowing, in Kerala, the main national festival is Onam. It has got a 10 days long festival in Kerala. Once we have, the Sangha Swayamsev have conducted Satyagraha all these Onam festival days to, what you say, enlighten the people and to let the people know about the violence of the Communist Party. We, what you say, all sort of democratic means have been taken by Sangha Swayamsevak to react to this violence. That is number one. See, recently, you may be knowing, in the before 2-3 years, we have conducted a national wide propaganda and try to, what you say, enlighten, to give the details about the communist violence to the national audience. I myself have toured all over Bharata and conducted press meetings and everything, So that is the first method in which we have reacted to these violent methods. And the second, Sangha is always for peace. Though we were being attacked, what you say, one-sided attacks were there, without any provocation. Even so many Swayamsevaks were attacked and killed and murdered. Even mothers were killed. You may be knowing. Our Sangha families, mothers and sisters were also attacked. 3 mothers were already murdered during their bomb attacks. But still, because we are living in a civilized society, we are in a cultured society, we have to, this is not the way to, what you say, eye for eye, tit for tat. Okay, it is to be done if all ways are being closed. But still, we are thinking that there are means to approach or to implement. That is, we have extended our hands towards this communist leadership. Let us sit together. Let us discuss what is the point of what you say, your opposition towards RSS. Let us discuss and sort it out. What is there which is not able to sort it out while sitting together? Communist Party has started the violence. It has been carried forward by the same party. So the only workable solution is CPM should lay down their arms and cooperate with the peace initiatives of RSS. See, I was an editor of Kesari for 4 or 5 years. I was the chief editor of Kesari. Without even discussing it, even I'm saying, I would like to say, without even discussing with our organizational hierarchy, and by my own initiative, we published an article calling for an end to the violence, which was killing the poor cadre of both sides. Okay, reaction may be there. It is happening. It is not proper. I didn't nitpick on history here on which who started it all. Neither did I dwell on how many died from each side. In my first article itself, I never mentioned our people were murdered, you have started. I didn't blame it even. I just extended my hands that let us discuss and let us work for the peace. Took a positive stand quite naturally. The article called for an immediate end to the violence, but CPM's reaction was one of sheer ridicule. Sheer ridicule. Their stand was that let the ones who started it all stop it. Just blaming. They are putting the blame on us. What does this even mean? When one of the journalists, after reading this article in Kesari, approached Pinarayi Vijayan and asked him, what is your reaction towards this article and the initiative taken by Kesari and so-called persons? But Pinarayi Vijayan, with utter dismay, utter dislike, utter anger, belittled us, ridiculed us, and said that let them put their arms down. So, another thing, none other than Parampujane Sarsanga Chalak. So, you are asking, what is our reaction? Parampujane Sarsanga Chalak, Mohanji Bhagavat, once he was in Kerala, he rarely meets the press, rarely meets. But on that day, he met media in Kannur to convey his condolences on the death of VHP leader, Vishwa Hindu Parishad leader, Ashok Singhal ji. But during that period also, because he was in Kannur, one of the journalists, a question was asked by him on political violence in Kannur. What was Sarsanga Chalak's reaction? He said, I'm quoting, we extend our hand of peace to CPM. This was our reaction. Imagine, this is someone as big as Mohan Bhagavat. None other than Mohan Bhagavat has extended his hand. But what was the reaction of Pinarayi Vijayan? Again, that same ridicule, belittling an organization. He hasn't got any belief in the democratic means or peace initiatives extended by RSS. He again said, asked Mohan Bhagavat to lay down the arms. As if Mohanji has taken some AK-47 and came to Kerala. He was saying that. This is the way in which they are reacting. But, and another thing, another part of this reaction, how Sangh is doing. Sangh is organizing people's initiatives to empower the victims and their families. RSS, with the local people's help, has made proper arrangements to look after the kith and kin of the deceased workers, who have been murdered. It has left no stone unturned to look after and treat these workers who have lost limbs and have been permanently disabled. The organization has got a mechanism for this, and it has evolved due to the peculiar circumstances. You may be knowing, because RSS hasn't got any political power there. It is an organic evolution of some systems and mechanism to run their cases, looking after the families of the deceased personalities. Of course, there are a number of false cases registered against Sangha Swayamsevaks. These cases are to be fought in the court. Along with that, those who are being arrested in the jail, those families are to be looked after. There's a huge mechanism. I am proud enough to say our workers of Kerala, especially the Kannur district, have evolved such a mechanism to handle this. Hundreds of families are being looked after. In Kerala, especially in Kannur area, our workers are not rich, even not middle class. Lower middle class are the majority of the Sangha Swayamsevaks. But even tightening their their clothes, they are working, and they are offering amount to look after their own brethren, their kith and kin. That's why it is going on, and we are fighting the cases even in the Supreme Court. Okay, knowing these type of efforts taken by Swayamsevaks and suffering, the national level, in the national level also, so many of our sympathizers, fellow travelers are also helping us in this endeavor. And finally, last but not the least, I have already said, we are approaching the public, we are approaching the court, we are approaching the public, judiciary, police, and also even we are extending hands towards the Communist Party. If all the doors are being closed before us, Sangha has to take care of our own swamsaks and their family. No doubt about that. We are taking care about their swamsaks in whatever mean you can imagine. We are there with our swamsaks and their family. So reactions are also going on. It is necessary to live with the pride and self-esteem, so that you cannot consider it as a crime. Our criminal procedure code and constitution is giving you the right to fight for your life, is it not? Is it not?
Yes.
When you are being cornered, you are being attacked, all the doors are being closed at your face, then we have to fight for our safety. That's also going on. We never go behind in that phase also. These are the ways in which we are working uh, for our swamsaks who have suffered, and also this is the way in which Sangha swamsaks are working there in Kerala. Namaskar.
So in fact, Nandakumarji, it was really glad to hear this from you. And in fact, in one of the articles, you had mentioned that there are two approaches to dealing with differences: the path of concord and the path of confrontation. And in fact,
Yes.
I think in the same article, you had also mentioned about the West's way of multiculturalism has failed, and the way forward is cultural assimilation or Indianization. Ano bhadra krutavo yantu vishwatah. So really glad to hear this from you, and I think this um, also brings us to a conclusion of our conversation. Um, I just had maybe one small question towards the end in terms of the way forward. You have already mentioned a lot of that. You also said that you're looking at a nationwide, you're doing a nationwide journey, in terms of what is happening. Would you like to just share some closing words in terms of the way forward?
uh, Going forward, as far as this confrontation is concerned, that I have already mentioned.
Yes.
See, we are
Yes.
approaching our people, and that work is going on. Uh, and as far as the organizational strengthening of RSS is concerned, you may be knowing that RSS is about to complete the 100th year in 2025. So,
Yes.
making that as an opportune moment, a sacred moment as far as the Sangha history is concerned, all our rank and file are putting their effort together, and all are working towards the organizational strengthening. Now, and the Sangha has reached only, I would like to say, only up to 60,000 of the total villages in Bharat in one way or another. You are all aware about the fact that in Bharat there are near about 6 lakh villages. So 1/10 of the total villages are being touched by RSS. Now, all Swayamsevaks are, I have already said, workers of planning it in that way that we have to reach at least 25% of the total villages of Bharat. And from there, we can, we can make a huge jump forward organizationally. One another factor you may be knowing, as Sangha, this nationalist ideology has already only reached up to 60,000 of the villages. Still, Sangha and this Sangha philosophy has got this huge impact in the nation's life. But if we can reach up to 2 lakhs or 2.5 lakhs of villages, then you may be knowing that the whole Hindu nation will be strengthened like anything. And another important work in which Sangha is involved is the Swaraj 75 campaign. See, after a long and very long battle for the selfhood of this great nation, I do consider, or we do consider, our independence struggle was a battle for selfhood. It was not a battle for political freedom alone. Yes, politics was a part, but along with that, it was predominantly a spiritual or an ethical war or a cultural war to inculcate the great spirit of selfhood in all aspects of our life. We fought anti-West colonial war. It was a long one, more than 500 years we fought. That means once the colonial masters, the Portugal, I would like to say, in 1498, when they reached the shores of Kerala, there started the resistance. That long independence struggle, our great heroes and heroines, their sufferings or their devotion, their dedication, all these things are to be remembered. So Sangha and Sangha organizations, all organizations are putting their efforts together to propagate these great values of our independence struggle, and requesting the whole public to work for the Atmanirbharata and Paramvaibhava of this nation with the great ideals which have been put forward by the great independence struggle leaders.
It was an absolute honor to host you and an absolute delight to listen to you. And on we come to the close of this conversation, and on behalf of Atharva Forum, I would like to thank you, Nandakumar ji, for taking the time out and sharing your views as well. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste, namaste, dhanyavad.